Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the Lazarus Project, Season 1, Episode 3. Another great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, in this particular episode, we have, we learn about the group that Rev is working with, the Lost something. I'm actually blanking on their name now. But either way, they're not really important. They're kind of like a background thing. Maybe they're going to be relevant in the end. Because Rev says they don't have Big Boy. So, makes you wonder where is it. Because he's like, it doesn't matter where it is. Because all you need is a detonator. Because no matter where it is, it's going to cause enough casualties and damage that it's irrelevant. All you need is a detonator. Which we also do see that Rev has got like a black eye. So they've been working him over. So there's that, torturing to get information type side of things. But either way, no one's aware of George's, working with Rev. He's going down this route because it's like, right, he wants Sarah back. And the moment he's like, oh, I want you to meet someone, and that ties into the beginning, what we got where we're like, we just learned about Janet last episode, and now we find out. I think it's so beautiful how they constructed this episode because, we find out not only, we meet Janet, but we also find out it wasn't just Janet that went through that. It was Rev because they were together. And obviously Archie was kind of like, Archie wasn't like, oh, congratulations when she found out Janet was pregnant. It's like, no. You know the protocols. You need to get pregnant between this time frame and this time frame so that you give birth around this time because she's like, her due date is July 1st. And it's like, what if the baby comes early? It's like, you have to get pregnant. You have to, it's jacked up to be like, oh, you can't just let it happen naturally. You have to make sure it happens around the time of a checkpoint, which Archie's reservations and warnings was correct. I mean, because it seems like, she's been down this path before, Janet's been down this path before where she's had to maybe not necessarily terminate a pregnancy, or maybe there's been situations where she has terminated a pregnancy or at the very least lost one, maybe like a miscarriage type of situation. But it's like, for her, Archie was like, terminate this one because it's like, it's going to be a lot worse in the long run, which we see it is. It's that's the interesting thing of, it is a heartbreaking story that gets more and more heartbreaking as you go along. And like I said, I love how they beautifully constructed it, that this is actually a parallel piece to last episode where we got to see Archie's past back in the summer of 2018, how that affected so many people. It played into George's life, not necessarily in a bad way. The whole him and Sarah thing was one element to it, but that ends up being a larger element to, obviously it plays a role in George's story because that seems like that was always meant to be. And because they would always cross paths, but sometimes it just wouldn't work out. And maybe this timeline, the original timeline, once again, we don't know. I was about to say, we don't, time had to gotten restart multiple times between them. But it's like, yeah, at some point when they were dating, they reached the next checkpoint. So it wasn't always getting reset to that particular moment, like they're meeting at that party and everything. So... but I just love how that's all, all of those three of these stories, last episode and everything with Sarah and then with Archie and now Rev and Janet, it's all connected in that regard. And it didn't even cross my mind, because obviously we didn't know the time frame of the Janet thing. Because Janet, that could have been years and years ago, which at this point in time, it was years ago, but it's knowing, it didn't even click in my head when it was oh, that's 2017. And then the summer 2018 happened. I was like, oh my God. The moment we saw that pop up on screen, I was like, I didn't even think about that. Oh my God, poor Janet and Rev. Because once again, I talked about last episode that I had never really thought about, time traveling, this show probably has, some of the most effed up time travel aspects to it, because it's usually it's only a last measure, but in the case of Janet and Rev, they went through the whole pregnancy, she gave birth to their son 2 weeks earlier. Once again, it's you went through the 9 months period of a pregnancy, then you had 2 weeks with a child, you were hours away from the next checkpoint because things didn't go down the way they thought. Because obviously during the pregnancy, they were worried because like, hey, someone is trying to sell like chemical nuclear weapons to North Korea. Shiv thought he took down the person, but it didn't work out. Because it is a unit that does care about each other because they're like, wait, Jen had a bleed? Wait, she's bleeding? Because even Shiv was worried. And it's like, no, it's like, no, I got like the pamphlets or whatever. And it's like, Wes is like, I can see that he's got the pamphlets. Do your thing, Shiv. So it was kind of this cute, beautiful moment where they're like, wait, are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Oh, is she fine? No, she had to bleed. It's like, wait, she's bleeding? Yeah, Janet's bleeding. Like, the fact is there's that beautiful, they are a family, and it is kind of sad to see how things have transpired, how things play out, but Shiv, like, they got the decoy information, so they didn't kill the right target, and they have no, like, the information about North Korea buying it or whatever, the nuclear, like, chemical weapons, like, it wasn't true, so they have no idea who actually has it and what's going to go on, and Shiv is trying to be very transparent and tell them, like, hey, I'm letting you know what's what. I think that's also why Shiv is isolated the way he is. I think this episode in particular is kind of a representation of probably, like, of the three main people that we really get to see kind of like probably like how much this storyline affected them would be like Archie, Shiv, and Wes. Because I think, Shiv has had a front row seat. I mean, who knows how many, like, Janet and Rebrubs he's experienced. But also, it's just, like, the fact is, it seemed like he deeply cared about them. And it does seem like going forward, he's kind of shut that down. And it does seem like Archie's probably done the same thing, too, in all these years. Like, these experiences, especially this summer of 2018, is enough to change everyone. I think it's so interesting, too, because Shiv is like, yo, like, George was making like apps, like making an app. He was a phone guy like a year ago. And we're asking him, like, we asked him to go to Paris. He wasn't ready. He wants to jump on this mission. He's not ready. I think he's ill-equipped for all of this. Like, he's not ready. And he hasn't really been jumped, like he's been jumped into the deep end of the pool. And it's so interesting that Archie's like, yes, he's ready, where it's like, I wonder, does she see so much kinship in him because of him losing Sarah, and she understands that pain, and George doesn't know that she understands that pain. But I'm curious, why does it seem like she's taken such an interest in George? Like, it feels like she can see his capabilities. I don't know, like, her pushing so much for being like, yeah, I think you are wrong. I think he is ready. He is equipped for, like, why does she have like that trust in George? I wonder, does he remind her of, cause I'm blanking on Home Dude's name from last episode. I think it was something with an R. I'm blanking on it. The guy that Archie was with, like, it makes you wonder, like, is there a little similarity, their personality and who they are? Maybe that's why Archie's a little more, has taken more of a liking to George in that capacity. I don't know. But things were, like I said, bad enough when it's like, hey, we're going to have to rewind time. And, because things went bad. Russia's blaming Russia and China are going back and forth, and things could turn into something bad. And Wes has to make the decision now, because if we hit the checkpoint, at least we'll have a year to try and prevent what's happening right now. But we hit that checkpoint going forward, like, it might be the point of no return, because the moment we hit this checkpoint of July 1st, 2018, the moment that happens, the fact is we will always rhyme to this point, and that won't give us enough time to fix everything. But also, we don't know if those hours could be the difference between being able to kind of reset everything for a year to kind of stop everything well before it transpires into what's happening now, or just us having no time at all to rewind things, because we're always going to be rewound to this point where we only have hours on the clock. So it, like, Wes was in a lose-lose situation, because it's like, right, it's the thing of like, right, the protocols, you're the one that decided to have the baby and everything. Like, Wes didn't go into that because Wes isn't trying to blame Janet and Rebrov, but it is just kind of the reality of their work, and they had to say goodbye to their baby. I even love that Shiv tried to, like, he wanted to be there, and he saw it at the very end. I think because everyone remembers, but I think it hits especially hard as a mutant, remembering everything. And Janet and Rebrov, that was painful. They ended up having a funeral for their son, but eventually she got pregnant again. So once again, I referenced it last episode. It's a Flashpoint situation, specifically the TV show version on the TV show The Flash, just because without spoiling it, like a character had a similar situation where they had a child, but they ended up having a different child when the timeline kind of got reset and everything. So, which I was like, oh, is that going to be what was the breaking point? It's like, no, their breaking point was even worse because their child was born. Actually, no, their child wasn't born until after the new checkpoint, but at least she was pregnant. Pretty far along in her pregnancy by the time of the checkpoint. But the problem is the summer of 2018 happened again and again and again and again and again and again. And the trauma that would put you through, because it's just like you're stuck in what feels like a never ending loop, because Archie and Home Dude couldn't like fix the situation from escalating into what it does, and so they have to constantly restart. It's like, right, she has to go through pregnancy of bleeding, having her child rip from inside of her time and time again, and it's just like, okay, here we go, like living these months over again. It's like, oh, I'm pregnant again. Oh, here am I giving birth to my daughter. First time it was pretty rough because they were like, hey, you're pregnant now. Oh, we're about to have our boy, but it's like, oh, we're having a girl. But okay, we'll move past that. But now it's like it happens again and again, and it wears on your sanity. It took a toll on them as individuals. It took a toll on them because when George figured out who Janet was, he was like, Archie told me about you. And Janet was like, I bet you she didn't tell you everything. I was like, what does that mean? And now we see the true horror. Like I said, time travel has never really, I mean, at least that I'm aware of, like I said, in this Groundhog's Day type of use of time travel, like we get it sometimes in time travel stories, like a Groundhog's Day, but it's typically most time travel shows utilize it in like a fun way. And yes, it can be used in a dramatic way as well, but a lot of shows typically use it as kind of like a fun, like time loop episode. But now it's like seeing the horrors of that loop and what it does on a person, to the point Janet ended up killing her and their own daughter because she just couldn't take it anymore. And Rubberoff was like, wait, what did you do? He's like, how could you do that? Like, how could you do that? I mean, it's heartbreaking. I mean, especially the way Janet talks about Rev. Like, they haven't been around each other since 2018. Because she's like, I haven't seen him in many years, but I owe him and I love him still after all this time. Because Rev recommended, like, hey, see, like, without telling George it was Janet, like, go see this person, she's going to build you a detonator. It's like, right, does Rev wants to end the world? It's like, no, he doesn't want to end the world. He's just heartbroken, and he's angry, and he's lashing out. People lash out when they're hurt, and I think Janet knows because she did, not to the extent that Rev does. She's doing her own thing, just getting by with her daughter. She even references like, oh, I can see it in her eyes, she's one too. And I was like, wait, it's like, are you implying that your daughter is a mutant? Because Shiv's been like, because being a mutant can come at different points in times. Like if it had, like for George, it came later in life. But like Shiv has been a mutant for a very long time, so it seems like the same thing happened with Janet's daughter, where it's like she's remembering all these timelines. That's also got to mess with you a little bit. She's a baby at the time, but there's still somewhere deep in her subconscious she remembers when you ended up, if depending on how much of a child actually remembers, especially in their infancy, like your daughter might remember when you ended up killing them and time restarted. Like, she isn't really going to be cognizant of it, but it's still there somewhere. Like, you could see like Janet's demeanor, because she had talked about, hey, Rev used to be funny. She's like, I used to be funny, but you could see like what this is taking a toll on her, being on the run, and just what their story. It's so heartbreaking and so tragic, and that's all I can use to describe those words. That's the thing of, you understand what pushed Rev to this. It doesn't excuse it. It's like, right, his end goal isn't to destroy the world. He's trying to put the world in a position where he's trying to destroy and put an end to the Lazarus project. Because I guess he's trying to I think he's probably trying to push it as much as he can so he can get a better understanding of how the whole time travel rewind works. Because even Janet's like, I have some ideas of how it works. I can't remember if she specifically was like, but I wish I didn't, or because the only person who seems to really know the ins and outs of it is Wes. Because Rev after all the stuff with, after summer of 2018, he confronted Wes and he was like, all right, show me the machine. She's like, there is no machine. He's like, then who am I working for? It's like, is there like a collective, a cabal of like billionaires? Like, it's like, but Wes is like, yo, the buck stops with me. That's as far as you get access to. But it's like, yes, like, once again, in the first episode, George got shown like what is essentially like their, like, the means in which they time travel. But once again, she never got into the ins and outs of it because she knows the science of it, but no one knows like what actually is making it possible, because she's the one, once Wes calls a code black, is like you call someone. Faye seemed to be in the know, and I think she's dead. They probably didn't have her reset after Faye died. So I don't think we've seen her in the office. She ain't one part of the main crew. I think this is the first episode we really got to see Faye at all. But Dennis killed her just to kind of make a point of like, right, you don't want to take me to the machine, but because for Wes, it's like, no, this is too important. I'm not going to compromise it no matter what. I'm willing to sacrifice myself. I don't know if like Faye was someone that was important to her. And it's like, don't worry, like she got more time than my son, because his son only got 2 weeks, and it's like, it is a thing of, it's like, right, we're saving millions of lives. Yeah. But it's like, how many people have died or who let's not mince words, because in their eyes, it's like, and I can see the same thing. It's like someone being unmade is the same as them dying, Other people probably look at it as like, well, it's like they didn't exist, and it makes it even worse, because that's a pain that you who remembers the previous timelines you have to carry that with you. And Rev had to carry that and the pain and the hurt over and over again through the 2018 rewinds. And it's just like, Jesus, like this isn't a blessing. It's a nightmare, especially for people who are mutants. The effed up thing is like, there's so many, once again, Archie brought it up last episode, so many women who will never, so many people in general who will never know, but the mutants will always know. Those who've signed up for this project and, gotten the thing that lets them remember, and those who are just naturally born mutants, like a Shiv, like a George. I don't know if Janet was a mutant, maybe their daughter, however, is. So I am curious, like, if you have the thing that the Lazarus Project gives you to make you remember the timelines, is your child more likely to be born a mutant because both of the parents have it? Because Rev and Janet both had. But once again, like, were they? Because I don't know if we know if Rev is a mutant or not, and maybe he's a mutant, and maybe Janet's a mutant, and that made their daughter more likely a mutant, which is also kind of crazy because you actually think about it, you're like, maybe their son was a mutant, but maybe the mutant gene hadn't activated yet. So that's even wilder to think about, like on some like existential level of like, right, your child, but it's like your child was unmade. So then you start kind of getting to the technicalities of like, it's a different child, but you're almost like, could your daughter remember, like, maybe she was born? That's me thinking way too much about it. I was like, could your daughter have been born your son, and she remembers being your son for those 2 weeks? I'm super overthinking it because you're two separate people, but I don't know, it crossed my mind because it's interesting how things work. I mean, I guess it isn't the same thing because it's like, right, this particular one sperm ended up fertilizing the egg that ended up being your son. A different timeline now, your daughter's fertilized the egg. It's that she won the sperm race essentially. So it's not like it could work like that, but I just think that's kind of interesting to think about. But I've talked myself out of like that thought process. Like I figured it was like wrong and stupid the moment I said it, but it was just something that had crossed my mind. I wasn't expecting George to spend as much time with Janet, like stay at her place with her and her daughter, because obviously her and Red Breath have like their codes of like, okay, what if he said this? It's like, cool, I'll let you live. Oh, what if, what is your code word of like, oh, like don't trust me or whatever? Oh, it's this. Well, what would you have done? She's like, oh, then I would have like smashed your skull in with a frying pan. He's like, ouch. Okay, Because he kind of has to joke about the whole situation because it's like, yeah, he's going to be the one detonating a bomb trying to get Sarah back. He also has to cover himself because if he does it, eventually the Lazarus Project is going to find out about what he's up to. Because he's the one that let the group there after this episode like know ahead of time, like, oh, you need to run. What's interesting though, it's like, is that going to be George's story? Like, is he going to go kind of pseudo bad guy? Like, is it, it's such an interesting thing, but once again, like understanding, don't have to agree with, but you can understand Revov's position of we're playing God. we've played God for so long, but it's also that thing of, it's an effed up like thing where you go, yeah, but you were fine with playing God for so long as when you were part of the Lazarus project, but the moment it took a toll on your personal life is when now all of a sudden you care about it, like the efficacy of it all, like, oh, the world is like, once again, you are heartbroken, you are lashing out, you need to destroy this project. It's not going to make you feel any better, but for you, you're justifying, like, it's just interesting when you really think about it, because it's like, right, you only really get into the nitty gritty of it now because of what you've lost and what you've been through. And I guess we also know, like, Shiv cared a lot about Rebrev and Janet, so I think that's why, like, he takes this so personal, because even, like, Rebrev and Shiv had their moments last episode. Now seeing their dynamic and how Shiv, it seems, invested in everyone in the group, because I think they are his family. And like I said, how this whole experience kind of shaped him, how it shaped Archie. I think he feels a personal responsibility when it comes to Rebrev, because it's like, if I hadn't done what I did, like if I'd done a better job of that situation in 2017, maybe who knows where we would be right now. So I think a lot of that regret weighs heavy. I'm sure a lot of regret weighs heavy on Archie, because it's like, yeah, because of that 2018 thing over and over and over again, it led to Rebrev and Janet going down their paths. Because Janet ultimately ended up leaving in the episode after she made it, like, George woke up, she had left the detonator and left. Because I think it's like, right, she probably can never stay in any place for too long. But it's like, now that George actually knows where I am, I can't take the chance someone might follow him back to me, like, so her and her daughter probably move around all the time, so maybe every once in a while Rebrev finds their location, or maybe she puts it out there like, hey, this is where I'm at if you ever want to reach out to me, type of situation. Or maybe that's where she's been the past, 6 years? 5 years, actually. But either way. And the shot at the end of the episode, just George there with the detonator. Is he going to do it? Because Janet left the message of, I hope you get her back. So, and I didn't talk about this. I can't forget. George does bring up the fact is, Sarah was pregnant initially. And it's like, it's not the same thing, but, because, the child wasn't born and everything, but for Janet, it's like a thing of like, no, it's okay. Like, I know you're not trying to compare and contrast, but she's also like, right, you've been through this somewhat yourself, of like that pain of like, yeah, that's the nightmare of it, and the nightmare of remembering the original timelines and everything. So what was before and what no longer exists, you kind of have to carry that, like, it's an anchor, and a noose around your neck that you can't quite ever get free of. I use the noose analogy a little too much. I kind of hate that. I'm like, so I'll go with the anchor. It's an anchor tied around you that's always going to be dragging with you. You carry it with you for the rest of your life, and you can probably like dull it, but you can never fully numb yourself to it. I think will probably be a way to look at it. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see what George does. He does. We don't know what date it is currently, but he does have a window of like, he's going to have to make that choice eventually if he's going to do this, because they reach the next checkpoint. There's no going back. So he seems like he's arming the detonators at the end, but even then it's like, well, we don't know if he'll actually push it, or maybe he has to get within a certain range. Like, now that he has the detonators, could he activate them from anywhere? Or does he need Rebrev to tell him specifically where the device is so he can be at least in close enough range? I would assume there's a limited range for them, so he has to know exactly where they are. He can't just detonate them from anywhere, so it's definitely going to be interesting to see, what happens next. Is the team going to catch on to George? Because I feel like out of anyone that's going to do it, it's obviously going to end up being... I feel like it'd be potent for it to be Archie, but I could definitely see it being Shiv. And it's like, well, a group that remembers is going to be hard to defeat, because it's like, right, you reset time, they're going to remember what you did, and, what, like I said, what that means for George's story. And even if he gets Sarah back, I mean, if I had to compare this story, it could easily turn into I think that's kind of where Rebrev and Janet's story kind of ended up being. It kind of flows into a What If episode 4. If you've seen Marvel's like What If, the animated series, episode 4, the Doctor Strange episode. Rev and Janet could kind of be that, but I feel like that could definitely end up being George's story. I'll leave it at that without spoiling anything, because it's a great episode. It's a heartbreaking episode, but yeah, like I could definitely see him going down a Doctor Strange in that universe storyline. So if you know, you know. If it comes up, I'll talk about it more in parallels, but I don't want to spoil that story if you don't know it. But either way, like I said, I'm very, very excited to see where the next episode ends up taking us with all of this. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and good